Hello, hello. This is Exploring Energy in Everyday Life with your co-host, Rebecca Karchere.
And Mary Von Ohlen. Good morning.
Welcome. We're talking about migraines today. We're going to talk about what is actually happening with migraines and then what kind of solutions we can offer you today to find relief and healing. So, Mary, you work with a chiropractic neurologist, so you have some good background in, I guess, the mechanics of migraines.
I do. I actually, years ago, I used to work with a chiropractic neurologist who did a lot of educating and treating patients with migraines.
Yeah.
So I can give you the background on the structural kind of neurological aspect behind traditional migraines. So the classic migraines, not to be confused with regular headaches or cluster headaches. Usually people with headaches will get them in general in certain areas. Migraines typically will be on one side or the other. Whenever I meet someone with migraines, I say, do they tend to come on the left side or the right side? And they think for a second, or they know right away. And it's always one side or the other. And I'll get to why that is neurologically speaking.
Yeah.
But migraines can be really debilitating. I did find that far more women tended to come in with them. I think that they affect women more for some reason. There's often a hormonal component to it. We can talk about that too. But let me first talk about the neurology of it. So meaning how the brain and the nervous system are involved. So I brought up the sidedness to migraines for a reason. So we all have a left and a right hemisphere.
Right.
Chiropractic neurology, functional neurologists, what they do is they really evaluate what's going on from a functional standpoint with our left hemisphere, frontal cortex, and our right, and the functions of them. And what happens is we all have some type of imbalance. No one's perfectly usually in balance in terms of one side will function better than the other. So there can be, a weaker functioning side, and that's where we'll see symptoms that are affiliated with that side. So that being said, with migraines, the classic migraines, usually when they start to come on, what happens is people will get, the individual will get a sign that they're about to get the headache. Before they get the pain, they get an aura. Sometimes they see spots. They might feel a little woozy. They might actually even get nauseous and throw up. Some people get them so badly that they get hospitalized based on the severity of the migraines. So when that happens, when that aura comes on, here's what's going on with the brain. So the brain controls the function of the arteries, right? So the brain is actually neurologically connected to the arteries in terms of their function. So what happens is, for some reason, what they believe in chiropractic neurology is that the side that has the weakness on it in migraine sufferers, for some reason, there's some malfunction that causes the arteries on one side, because we have a sidedness to our neurological function, to constrict when they're not supposed to. So imagine being choked out on one side of the blood flow to your head, and that's where you get woozy, you might see spots, right?
Right.
But eventually the arteries fatigue and they have to release again, and then it's been choked off. So imagine there's all this blood flow that got choked off, and now there's this rush of blood flow, and that's the throbbing headache. So just a little bit of an understanding of that, what's behind those symptoms, kind of physiologically, neurologically speaking. Now, what happens in traditional medicine, of course, doctors will prescribe drugs. I mean, that's the typical route, right? Migraine drugs that hopefully, if you can catch it in time, you get the aura, quickly pop your I'm blanking on the names of the common ones right now, but your migraine drugs to try to prevent the symptoms from getting bad when you have that onset. Is that treating the cause of it? No. So functionally speaking, what a chiropractic neurologist will do is, once they evaluate and determine where the weakness is, then they'll apply natural physical modalities to strengthen and improve the function of the weak side.
Right.
So hopefully that helps explain it.
Yeah.
And one quick little note is, that I learned from those days as well, is that the brain does control. So when people think about left and right brain, they say, oh yeah, well, my right brain controls left movements, right? And right, it's the opposite side. And actually, I remember the doctor used to say, maybe more like 10%. It's actually only voluntary movement. So when I'm moving my right hand, yes, the left frontal cortex is coordinating that, but
Yeah.
everything else on my right side that's involuntary, like all the little muscles that are supporting my spine right now that I can't consciously manipulate, those are, and everything else like blood flow and the arteries, all that, are controlled by the same side. So just a little tip to our listeners is, if you go and you get evaluated or you go for a little checkup, a traditional checkup with any kind of doctor or naturopath, make sure that they're checking your blood pressure on both sides.
Yeah.
Because that doctor used to have people that he'd have to send immediately to a cardiologist and say, oh, I just had my checkup last week. I'm fine. Well, did they check your blood pressure on both sides? No. Well, one side was out of control and the other, it seemed fine. And that's why, because there really is a left and a right aspect to the neurological function. So
Interesting.
that's that. And I've seen people, even people close to me, go and get help from a chiropractic neurologist with traditional, classic migraines and have them go away in a short period of time and then stay gone, which is great.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's also a hormonal component, which Rebecca, you can probably speak a little bit more to that. And what I'll say again, with more women that tend to present or at least go seek help for migraines, one important question in the consults, for holistic practitioners is to ask, when do they happen and can you track it with your hormonal cycle? Because obviously our system is more taxed at that time, but maybe you can speak a little bit more to that, Rebecca, the hormonal component and also what you see nutritionally with migraine sufferers.
Yeah. Well, definitely. Right. I agree with, more women around their menstrual cycle. So, again, it's when we're talking about this kind of work, it's really specific to the individual. So I'll give you some generalizations. For instance, what I would treat someone, what you were describing is, one side will be weak, one side will be off, right? I would me as a practitioner would scan their neck, and most often than not, they're going to have a subluxation. And I want to just demonstrate, just for, if you've never worked with me, I muscle test, self-test like this. And I'll literally, and I'm doing this all in the ether, but I want to just share with, and again, I'm talking to people over the phone, so there's no one physically in front of me. But I'll scan in my mind and in the ether, and using my right hand to muscle test. I'll test C7, C6, C5, and go all the way to C1, and almost always there'll be a C1 subluxation. And I'm sure it correlates, like you said, with the side that's off. And then, of course, I would say, okay, go to a chiropractor, get your C1 adjusted, and that's my work is done on that, with that aspect. But so let me just give you, the brain or the head is, when it's compromised, it's a reflection of liver health. So when I took my TBM certification, I was taught, very simply that, head issues, brain issues like headaches, you want to think digestion, you want to think liver. Okay, so that's tip number one. Number two is Louise Hay has her own list of, what the beliefs are and what the emotions are when someone has X, Y, or Z. And so I pulled up with migraine headaches. A person that has migraine headaches tends to have this belief or issue with life, a dislike of being driven or resisting the flow of life. And so I just want to say that, because for that type of issue, we'd want to look at the emotional side and their life and their circumstances and so on. Now, this ties into what I'm going to say about the menstrual cycle. When we have our menstrual cycle, it brings out our weaknesses. Okay, so let's say, and we'll get to the nutrition, but let's say we don't like our job and we have these migraines every month that just happen to coincide with our menstrual cycle. The way I would interpret that is that's your intuition, and that's bringing up a weakness that you're tolerating all month, that you're dealing with and coping with. And then you have this accelerated need or this additional demand on the body, and the weakness is exposed. So yes, you do have to look at that demon and say, okay, this is what's really going on. Let's not be in denial about it, and that's something you'd want to explore. Okay. Resisting the flow of life is exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about health and disease, is we need to be in the flow. So no matter what is going on in your life, if you're not in the flow, if you're in resistance to your current circumstances, boom, a migraine might be your, how you experience that resistance on a physical level. Okay. So nutritionally speaking, the endocrine system, also, the endocrine system is so, I feel like it's so all-inclusive. It includes blood sugar and hormones and so forth, digestion. And so it's kind of a crapshoot when we talk about it, but yes, it is very specific to the endocrine system. So for someone who has migraines, I would absolutely look at their blood sugar, and I almost always find that they have either hyperglycemia, hypoglycemia, or combination. And so blood sugar for sure, and I would put them on the sugar control program that Dr. Viktor Frankl developed, which is the Atkins diet before it became commercialized. So it's Dr. Atkins and Dr. Frank, and there might have been another doctor formulated this before it got on mainstream. And this is specific to resetting the endocrine system. So it's getting that blood sugar nice and stable, and that'll help a lot with migraines. The other thing is that you'd want to look at, with the blood sugar imbalance, you're also going to find food allergies, because one leads to the other. When your blood sugar is stable, it's almost like you're impervious to your environment. When that blood sugar is unstable, you're susceptible to being affected by the environment, and that includes foods. So someone with migraines most often would find that they have a quote-unquote allergy to caffeine, chocolate, and citrus is coming to mind. Those would be three big ones you'd want to check. And then there'd be a plethora of other more common ones like wheat and dairy and sugar. With any one of those, so if you don't have, I'm teaching source energy technique to teach people how to know how to do this for themselves. But if you want to go to a holistic practitioner and say, check my cervical spine, check for food allergies, check my blood sugar, that would be where I would start. And then look at maybe incorporating some psychological help, like the emotional freedom technique, some kind of support that way. But that's what I do every day. I'm giving people other options if they didn't want to make an appointment with myself, if they're not comfortable or whatever, and you want to be self-sufficient. I'm giving you all those options.
That's great. And everything that you explained in terms of the hormones and the food allergies, you hit that before. I was going to ask you about that, because that's, again, if we look at the medical field, the Western medical field, and how they address this, it's the other thing that they might, beyond just prescribing, anti-migraine kind of medication, they'll also maybe say, okay, let's go a step further and see what are the triggers. Now, the triggers aren't the causes. That's just what's triggering, your system to be further compromised or, have a flare up, right? It's just like, what are the stressors? And often that's the migraine sufferers will go through this whole litany of trying to figure out, is it coffee? Is it, does coffee make it better? Does coffee make it worse? Is it chocolate? Is it this food? Is it that food? And avoid this smell and avoid this circumstance and this type of environment. So again, it's just, the system becomes compromised. And so it's hypersensitive to all sorts of things that can, trigger that response. And what you're talking about is, okay, you don't need to identify each food that you're sensitive to. It's like, well, why are you having that response? It's probably endocrine related, blood sugar, there's the emotional piece. Address all that, and then you don't have to rely on a drug and have your life ruled by these things.
Exactly. Another key player here in as far as maybe a nutritional support, we talk about blood sugar, but part of what regulates blood sugar are the adrenal glands, which also regulate hormones and stress and digestion, and inflammation. So most often I'm going to when I work with someone who has migraines, I'm going to look at their adrenal glands and most likely support something like Drenamine or desiccated adrenal or holy basil or ginseng, something to get their adrenals strong again. And they'll be able to regulate blood sugar and the environment and the stress, and and so from that perspective, yeah. I mean, I'm trying to like streamline this conversation, but really because working with individuals, everyone has their own story, so I'm just giving some generalizations.
Yeah, that's great, and that's our intention, right? To empower people with having a better idea and having the full picture of the different elements that could be involved behind what they're suffering with, so they don't have to suffer anymore. So whatever resonates with you, you might say, oh, I've already tried X, Y, and Z, and oh my gosh, I never knew about that. It could be C1 subluxation. Maybe I should go see an upper cervical chiropractor or a chiropractic neurologist.
Right.
Or maybe you've done all that and you're still having issues, and maybe it's something more of that Louise Hay type of thing, where it's more on the emotional and spiritual level.
Right.
No matter what, there's a solution. That I can tell you.
Exactly. We're just giving you ideas that are, these are all possible solutions, as opposed to a fake solution, which is take a drug, it's just not a solution at all. It's like, let's just pretend this doesn't exist. Okay, good job. So the other thing for more sophisticated or advanced thinking here is, I just want to give you these 2 points, which are right here, which is called the corpus callosum. When we connect to the corpus callosum, that may also be involved, because that's the part of the brain that helps the left and the right hemisphere flow. So, I would most likely also check somebody for that as well, and maybe either, correct the imbalance or offer a supplement to help strengthen that connection. Yeah.
Great. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I think that sums it up.
Yeah. So thanks for watching.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching, and please comment, or if you want to connect to either one of us to get further information. If you're a migraine sufferer, we'd be happy to coach you or lead you in a direction that will give you relief and healing. Our websites and all that information will be below. So thanks for watching. Okay. Take care, everybody.